I think he's the best place to beat Pierre Poilievre, who, as I've said publicly, is a fake.
The Prime Minister has a deep love for this country. Life is hard for Canadians right now. He understands that.
None of the members of Parliament or ministers that I've spoken to have told me that they think that the Prime Minister should go.
Cabinet ministers are publicly supporting the Prime Minister after voters rejected the Liberals in the Toronto-St. Paul's by-election. And while the Liberals deal with their internal fallout from that, another external challenge has emerged. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says her province will opt out of the new federal dental care plan. In a letter to the Prime Minister, Smith writes, healthcare planning and delivery is an area of provincial jurisdiction, and the new federal plan infringes upon this exclusive jurisdiction. For more on this, I'm joined now by Federal Minister of Health, Mark Holland. Minister, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, David.
I want to get to the Alberta dental issue in a second, but first I need to ask you about the by-election in Toronto-St. Paul's. I've been talking to a lot of members of your caucus right now, and they are absolutely rattled by this outcome. They think the government needs to make some major changes. You're a 905 MP. How are you taking what happened in this by-election on Monday night?
Well, look, I think it was disappointing. I knocked on doors there. We knew it was going to be tight, and I think Leslie's phenomenal, so I was disappointed. But David, I've been around a long time. I've seen all kinds of different by-elections. I'm very careful not to read a lot into an individual result. I think, we really need to make sure that the takeaway here is that we work all that much harder, that we focus all that much more on the people in this country who are having a difficult time. These are very difficult times globally. People are struggling. And they want a government that is doing everything humanly possibly to help them. And so for me, it means focusing that much harder on making sure we get people dental care, that we get people diabetes medication, that we get people contraceptives, that we continue the really positive good things that we're doing in our health system. So I think we're building a really great story in a very turbulent world for Canada's leadership. Don't think anybody would want to trade Canada's position right now with any other country in the world, but it's a tough time to be a human being, and certainly that's what you heard at doors.
Right, but you said you've been around a long time, and that can be an asset in politics, but it can also be a liability in politics, right? Because people get to the point where they just want change and they're not listening anymore. The consensus I hear from talking to Liberal MPs and Liberal staffers is something needs to change. So is that message? Is it staff? Is it the Prime Minister? Is it the Cabinet? What do you need to do to change? Because just working harder doesn't seem like it'll necessarily get it done.
Well, I think there's one thing Canadians want, and that is a government that is only focused on their betterment and well-being. And so I think the answer is very simple: to wake up every morning and give your absolute best and put in every ounce of effort you have to making the country a better place, and making sure that there's better health outcomes and that people have the services and supports they need to get through difficult times. There's nobody popular as an incumbent government right now. It's a difficult time to govern. But as the dawn breaks in the world, there will be the people who just hold mirrors to what's wrong and broken and push into people's pain and try to profit from it. And though there will be those people shown, and I'm very proud to serve along with a Prime Minister and a caucus that's focused on solutions. And I think as the dust settles on that over the next 16 months, people are going to see that we have not stopped, not a second, whether or not it was through the pandemic or all the turmoil that came after it, focusing on people and making their lives better. And I think that's all there should be. And if there's somebody, another party that can demonstrate that they're not just trying to play politics or criticize things, but they have a better plan for the country, then let them put that forward. But right now we've seen no plan, right? All we've seen is criticism. All we've seen is finger pointing. So right. Congratulations, congratulations, you're popular in pointing out flaws. But that's the easy part. One of the things I've seen since 2004, David, is that when rubber hits road and it's time to put solutions forward, then you suddenly have to be examined on what you actually are going to do for people.
But they were examined on Monday, weren't they? They were examined on Monday in Toronto, St. Paul. Well, I mean, look, the walls of Fortress.
What did they do?
They won Toronto, St. Paul's. They breached Fortress Toronto. Like, that matters, though, Minister. That matters.
I mean, come on. What did they do? What did the Conservatives do? They came in and they said everything that's wrong in the world. No, because people are upset for sure. And then it's in a by-election where there is no consequences to flipping a seat. And right now, who's happy about the world? Like, it's tough out there. I don't care. You go to any country. I don't care where you go. These are difficult, difficult times. People are frustrated with that. So yeah, congratulations to the Conservatives. They got people to agree that the world is tough right now. What did they offer in way of solutions? In a by-election, you don't have to do that. You don't have to tell people how you're going to govern differently or what solutions you're going to do. You know, I'm talking yesterday here, I was talking with a dental hygienist, and she was saying to me, like, what a difference it's making for people to be able to get dental care. You know, people showing up to somebody not taking their family photographs for years because they were embarrassed of their smile, suddenly being able to take a picture with their family and be proud of it. Like, that's what's going to be at stake in 16 months. Not some comment about, you know, what's wrong with the world. I get that. That frustration is important. But to have a conversation about, does a diabetes patient deserve diabetes medication?
But do you think you're being a bit too dismissive of this result? I mean, but don't you think you're being a bit too dismissive? Like, this is a by-election the Prime Minister engineered by shuffling Carolyn Bennett out of cabinet, appointing her to Denmark, and you threw everything at it as a party and lost. I mean, that sends a strong message, Minister.
Carolyn Bennett, David, Carolyn Bennett for 26 years served this country with extraordinary aplomb. And there's no such thing as a safe seat. There shouldn't be. Carolyn Bennett earned the support of that riding through extraordinary work, and I got to work with her, and I was so proud to do it. But, you know, what I'm saying is that when you get into a real election, you're into real choices.
Right.
And Canadians are going to have to look not just about an expression of frustration. I get that, and that's fair. And I think it's important for us to hear that and to redouble our efforts to serve them. But in 16 months' time, the real choices get made. Do you choose an angry leader who just points out the problems of the world and has no solutions, who amplifies everybody's anger, who points out everything that's wrong, and he's a master of it? I give it to him. Nobody points out what's wrong in the world better than him. The problem is all you need is Google to do that. What are your solutions? How are you going to make it better? How are you going to explain to seniors that you're going to take away their dental care? How are you going to explain to diabetes patients that you're going to take away their diabetes medication? That's going to be the conversation. But in the meantime, we got to get the job done. We got to serve Canadians. And that's what I'm squarely focused on, making sure that right now we have 200,000 seniors who've got dental care. I want to make sure it's every senior in this country.
Well, let's talk about that, because Alberta is saying they don't want to opt into this program. They say it duplicates what they already do. They've written a letter to the Prime Minister from Daniel Smith saying they don't want part of that program. The Alberta Dental Association, roughly 60 to 70% of their dentists haven't signed up, and they say it's just too cumbersome and too complicated. So how do you deliver dental to Alberta when the Premier and the Dental Association says it's not for them?
Well, let's put it in the opposite terms. 2 months ago, there were zero dentists participating, and there were no seniors getting service. Now, 200,000 seniors across the country are getting service. As you referenced, there are, in just 2 months, about 40% of dentists in Alberta are signed up to this program. So if Premier Smith says she doesn't like it because it's provincial jurisdiction, well, with all due respect, these are people they didn't cover. These are people who weren't getting service. These are people who were left to wind up in emergency rooms with preventable illnesses. I'm all for working with provinces. I mean, if Alberta wants to take it over, as long as it's of the same quality and there's no interruption of service, I mean, we're not going to give them more money than it's costing for us to administer it. But, you know, like, I think this is politics, you know, and it's too bad, because this is about, you know, people's well-being. Like, you know, talking about, I was talking to a dental student, you know, named Ryland, talking about a situation, somebody couldn't get dental care, then access to their mouth so painful they were gargling with gasoline. This is Canada. Yeah, I don't care. Like, you figure out the jurisdiction. Like, we got to get care to people.
So
that's what we're focused on.
But Daniel Smith is adopting a position, repeatedly so, not unlike what we see from premiers of Quebec, that we run our own program, give us the money, we'll opt out, and we'll use it for this. Are you prepared to do that with Alberta? You're prepared to give them the cash and let them expand program coverage, as the letter suggests, for low-income people? Well,
I'm absolutely willing to work with Alberta. And I think that the question here is, do we make sure that the standard of care is at a minimum as good as we're delivering it? And if they can do it better, then I want to work with them. I'm not looking for fights. You know, we're looking for solutions. But it seems to me that, you know, picking the way of going about it, it seems to be trolling for conflict, and I don't think that's helpful. I've said right from the beginning on this, we got an incredibly successful program. Providers are loving it. They're signing up in droves. They're finding it easier to use than private insurance. They're finding it far easier to use than any provincial program they participated in. So, it's great news. It's great news for Albertans. It's great news for all Canadians. Now, if they want to work with us to do it even better, I'm all for it. Like, I think that's what people want to see in healthcare. And I have to say, in Alberta, Adriana Lagrange is great. She and I were able to work through an Aging with Dignity agreement. We're able to work through an agreement on working together to get more doctors and nurses for Alberta. Like, we're getting things done. That's what I want to do. And I think that's what people want to see. They want to see results. They want to see a focus on them, not a focus on politics. So I would say to Premier Smith, work with us. Don't seek the conflict, seek the solution.
Okay, one last question to focus on politics. You said the real choice is going to be about 16 months from now when we get to the next election, and that's where real change is on the table. Are you convinced at this point in time that it's going to be Justin Trudeau leading your party into that next election? Do you think he stays? Do you think he should stay?
I think he should stay. I think this is a man who, through the pandemic, led us through incredibly dark times of incredible anxiety in this country. I've watched him day in, day out, accept incredible poundings and criticism and wake up with such optimism and belief in this country. I've watched him care so deeply about service and the best interests of this country. I'm so proud to serve alongside Justin Trudeau. And I'm extremely excited to litigate the arguments that I'm just talking about 16 months from now, because I think that it's going to be one of the most consequential decisions in Canadian history. What kind of Canada do we want? What kind of future do we want for our country? And I think Justin Trudeau is absolutely the person to lead our party.
Minister Mark Holland, thank you so much for your time. Good to speak to you, sir.
Thanks so much, David.
All right, we're going to check the political pulse with our panel of insiders, so I hope got some sleep after our by-election show on Monday night. Craig McEachern is a former Liberal ministerial staffer. Melanie Richer is a former Director of Communications for the federal NDP. And Fred Delory, well, he is a former national campaign manager for the Conservative Party. You all look well rested, gang, after the marathon on Monday. Greg, let's start with you. I've been talking to a lot of Liberals who are pretty upset. I even had one Liberal say to me they're almost glad Toronto St. Paul's happened this way so the PMO can get the message on the need to change. What are you hearing right now? What does the PMO and the staff, the Prime Minister, need to do to calm things down?
Well, please don't read into it that I evacuated out of Ottawa to come to beloved Halifax because of that. But I'm not surprised. I mean, for me, what the by-election does is it crystallizes every big worry that Liberals have had. You can tell yourself that it's not as bad when you lose an election in Durham, a by-election in Durham, where the Liberal Party was never strong. But it's really hard to make that case in Toronto St. Paul's. And there were a lot of issues in the lead up, like even the amount of time before the by-election was actually called, right, which made me suspect that they were not getting the type of candidates, multiple candidates that they were interested in. But this is a real world example that of how people are reacting to your message. It's evidence, and I like Minister Holland's feistiness. I want to see it more about other issues instead of the Liberal Party gets accused a lot about preachiness, but on this one I don't think we can mistake the message, and I think the other part of this is what's coming out now is things that people have been trying to say for a long time around the way Liberals communicate and the preachiness and the virtue signaling. There is a time for that. There was a time for that. I don't suspect that it's now. I look to somebody like Minister Mark Miller, who told everyone to give their head a shake. That is the way people should be thinking about this, reacting to this, and that's the language that should be used if you really want to do everything you can to win the next election.
Right. So Mel, one of the things we're hearing now from a lot of MPs is that they want a national caucus meeting because they want to be able to talk about this. And they felt they've had these before, even by Zoom, but they're not scheduled to meet as a group until Nanaimo later this year, is what they're saying to me. And they say if we wait that long, it's going to be too late. How do you think the leadership group of the party needs to respond to this?
Totally. I think, we all talked about how the Prime Minister wants to stay and the team around the Prime Minister is saying that he's going to stay and they're, doing the plans as they would going to the next election. But if you've got a caucus that is worried they're not going to win their seats, you got to bring your people together. You got to bring your people together. You got to calm the storm a little bit, and you have to reassure them that you have heard what folks have said to you in Toronto this week, and that you're doing differently. Because if you're not bringing your people together, you're going to have every one of these folks who are worried about winning their seats out in the news talking to journalists, whether on background, or publicly, to say, here's why he needs to step down, here's what he needs to do. If you are not calming the waters, those folks it's going to be like a bit of a mutiny. So I don't understand. We're not going to meet until later in the fall. That seems just totally bananas to me as somebody who used to do caucus management. As it relates to how the team around the Prime Minister is handling this or taking this, or maybe next steps. What we saw just now with your interview with Minister Holland, to Greg's point, appreciate the feistiness, appreciate the fight. We haven't really seen the Liberals almost ready to fight, so that's good. But the message of oh, what is this? Who cares? It's a contest by-election. It's not a result that matters. That is just more of the same, not realizing that people are not connecting with what you're saying, and you're just not going to fix it and just double down. Is just going to make that l'écart bigger. It's not going to close things off.
So Fred, I'm not sure if you have much experience with a jittery caucus after a disappointing election result, having worked for Mr. O'Toole, but it feels like what's happening now, I don't know if it's quite to that level, but I'm hearing about text chains and side conversations and group chats and meetings between regional caucuses, city caucuses, and they're anxious in a way they haven't been, because until Toronto St. Paul's, the polls were kind of theoretical, and now it's real.
It's very real, and they should be very concerned about it and understand where the Liberal caucus is perturbed about what's happening. But at the end of the day, it's not about bringing in caucus and getting ideas from them. Trudeau and his senior team need to map out a true plan into how they get back into this. And that's what's missing. If you bring caucus in right now, all it's going to be is a lot of pitchforks and angry people. And I don't think you'll get anything productive from that. They do need to have a caucus meeting at some point this summer. You can't wait until the fall. That is way too long to let this sit. But what Trudeau needs to do, honestly, sit down with 4 or 5 of his top people. It's not 10 people. It's not 20. It's 4 or 5. Make sure they have the polling, the research, go through it and write that narrative that I've been talking about for a year now that's been missing. I know they're doing these side projects, they're doing all these different policy announcements and things that may help Canadians in different ways, but there's no overarching story they're telling. Minister Holland was out here talking about different things he's doing with dental care. It's an interesting story. It helps a lot of Canadians and it could be a good thing, but it's not telling me that big story that Pierre Poilievre is telling me, that Canada is broken. And he has a plan, and it's very simplistic. It's very clear. It's 4 points that he makes, but it resonates and it gets across to people. The Liberals are not doing that. So I really think his senior team, if they want to try to salvage this, need to go to ground. This may be their opportunity to do it, where they really realize now they need to.
So Greg, Fred is speaking about getting back into the game electorally, but can you, with this situation, not meet with the caucus and not? Someone said to me today, you need a couple of weeks of clear, aggressive caucus management right now, because that is an immediate thing in front of you as a party.
Yeah, absolutely. The 2 things that I would be very critical of the last 9 years would be not taking communications and media relations seriously. The other one would be caucus management. And that really came out in 2019 during the SNC-Lavalin issue with the departure of 2 people from cabinet. It became very evident at that time it's not an area that the Prime Minister enjoys. And if you look at the recent books that have come out about the Prime Minister, those books confirm that. I remember at the time asking, what is caucus's reaction? And the person that I was talking to, fairly senior, had a really tight smile on their face, and they said, the Prime Minister, this is not where he likes to be. And I pointed out, the book that came out on Mulroney, the Mulroney tapes. Prime Minister Mulroney hated that book, but if you read that book, it's really evident of how strong Mulroney's caucus management skills were. And that caucus was united and very tight right up until the end. There was loyalty there. And I think the Prime Minister has, he's excellent with strangers wading into crowds, and there's a very close circle around him. It's that middle area where that's always been a challenge for him. And you've got to ignore that. I disagree with Fred a little bit about bringing in 4 or 5 advisors. I think you need to get away from the people you've been in the same room for a long time. I'm not saying that you let them go or anything like that, but if you're finishing each other's sentences at this point, maybe it's time to hear from some new people.
Okay, we got to go a bit quick, but Mel, on that point, I spoke with someone today in the Liberal caucus, someone who is very loyal to the Prime Minister and wants the Prime Minister to stay, but says he needs to demonstrate change to the caucus and to the country, and that's, how do you do that? If you shuffle the cabinet, you might get another Carolyn Bennett, you might get another by-election. If you shuffle your staff, you've got people too close to you, and with the Harper ethics laws, it's hard to bring in people for what could be a short-term operation. How do you demonstrate change right now with sort of the limitations around you as a government at this stage in your life cycle?
Right, and I don't think that by any way this is easy, but figuring out what's next, figuring out what that narrative is, and that's not something that you're going to be able to pull together in a day. But you need to, or Canadians need to know why it is that you're doing this. Why are you doing it? What is coming next? And it can't just be, because the Prime Minister has a legacy that he wants to leave behind. That doesn't make my life better, right? That doesn't help me pay the bills. That doesn't make me less angry. So figuring out what is next? Why are you still here? Why are you doing this? I think is the thing that they really need to turn things around, to show the caucus got a plan, and that they're thinking, what's coming next.
So Fred, just give you the last word. I know you talk about narrative, right? They're not going to say Canada's broken, obviously. They say Canada's hurting, Canada's struggling, people need help. How do you, it's an economic argument, right? Do they need a new economic messenger? Like, how do they do this with the way they're structured and with the way they run as a government? What would you suggest they do to fix their narrative challenges that you talk about all the time?
Well, on that point, Mark Carney has been the name that we keep hearing as a potential future replacement for Trudeau. I would be recruiting a big economic name, if not him, someone like him, who can come in and be a part of the team that can help set the path forward. Someone that Canadians can have faith in, that they have a plan on the future for the economy. That is the big issue right now, affordability and inflation. And if they can show us they have a plan, roll up their sleeves and look like they're working on this, instead of all of these different projects where they're all over the map and there's no overarching theme.
Yeah, they talk values a lot when the Canadians are focused on value. How much is the house? How much is the car? And do I have enough to pay for it? And you got to get it there somewhere. All right, Fred Delory, Melanie Richer, Greg McEachern. Wanted to get your reaction because you had to leave Monday before we got the results. It's good to talk to you all.
I wish we stayed. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, 5 a.m., Fred. Go away. All right, we'll talk.